The jackhammer's rhythmic pounding echoed through the quiet suburban neighborhood of Oakwood Estates, punctuating the otherwise peaceful Saturday morning. Tom Mitchell wiped sweat from his brow as he paused to survey the half-demolished concrete pool in his backyard. 6 years of fighting a losing battle against leaks, chemical imbalances, and astronomical water bills have finally led to this moment, demolition day. The pool that had once been the crown jewel of the property had become nothing more than an expensive, time-consuming pit that the Mitchell family hadn't used in over 3 years. Tom took a swig from his water bottle and glanced at the property line where his neighbor, Diane Keller, stood with her arms crossed, phone clutched in her manicured hands, scowling. This was the third time she'd appeared at the fence line in the past hour, and Tom knew from experience that Diane's appearances were never harbingers of neighborhood goodwill. "You know this is against the regulations, Tom," Diane called out, her voice carrying that unmistakable tone of someone who had memorized every line of the Homeowners Association bylaws and wielded them like weapons. Section 12, paragraph 3 clearly states that all external property modifications require board approval. Tom sighed deeply. He'd done his homework. "Actually, Diane, I checked with the board last month. Removal of the pool is classified as a safety improvement, not a modification. It's all been cleared." Diane's face flushed the same crimson as her perfectly tailored blazer. "We'll see about that. This is lowering everyone's property values. Do you think anyone wants to look at a dirt pit from their windows?" Before Tom could respond that the dirt pit was temporary and would soon be a beautiful garden patio, plans he'd already shared at the last HOA meeting that Diane had mysteriously missed, she had spun on her heel and marched back to her immaculately landscaped yard. "Don't let her get to you," called Sarah, Tom's wife, as she emerged from the house with a tray of lemonade for the workers. She's been looking for a reason to complain since we declined to join her petition against the Thompsons' basketball hoop last summer. Tom nodded, but the knot in his stomach tightened. Diane wasn't just any neighbor with a complaint. She was the self-appointed guardian of Oakwood standards, a title she had actually printed on business cards that she distributed at community events. Her husband, a quiet accountant who seemed perpetually exhausted, rarely intervened in her crusades. The demolition crew foreman approached, wiping dust from his hands. "We're making good progress, Mr. Mitchell. Should have the concrete completely removed by end of day tomorrow. Then we can start filling in." "That's great, Mike. Thanks for fitting us in on short notice." "No problem. Though your neighbor there has already asked for our permits twice and tried to tell my guys they can't park on the street." Tom wasn't surprised. "Just ignore her. Everything's in order." Little did Tom know that across the street, Diane was already making a series of phone calls. First to the HOA president, who didn't answer, then to the city code enforcement office, closed on weekends, and finally, with increasing desperation, to a number that would set in motion a chain of events that would make the Mitchell family the talk of Oakwood Estates for months to come. Sunday morning arrived with clear skies and a refreshing breeze, perfect weather for continuing the pool demolition. Tom was up early, excited to see the progress. The crew wasn't scheduled to arrive until 9, but he couldn't resist stepping out onto his back porch with coffee in hand to survey yesterday's work. The concrete shell was about 70% demolished, with piles of rubble neatly stacked for removal. His peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of a car door slamming in front of his house. Tom walked around to the front yard to find a police cruiser parked at the curb. 2 officers, one older with salt and pepper hair and a younger officer who looked fresh out of the academy, stood talking to Diane, who was gesturing wildly toward Tom's property. "That's him," Diane exclaimed as Tom approached, pointing as if she caught a fugitive. "He's destroying neighborhood property values and violating at least 6 different municipal codes." The older officer, whose nameplate read Sergeant Wilson, nodded patiently at Diane before turning to Tom. "Good morning, sir. We received a call about some potential code violations and disturbing the peace. Mind if we have a quick word?" Tom felt his stomach drop. "Of course, officer. Would you like to come around back and see what's happening?" As they walked toward the backyard, Tom couldn't help but notice Diane following at a distance, phone raised as if documenting the encounter. "Ma'am," the younger officer called back, "we'll handle this. Please wait out front if you want to speak with us afterward." Diane's face contorted in indignation, but she reluctantly retreated to the sidewalk. In the backyard, Tom explained the situation, the years of pool problems, the proper permits he'd obtained, and the approval from the HOA board for the removal. "I have all the paperwork inside if you'd like to see it," Tom offered. Sergeant Wilson shook his head. "That won't be necessary right now. This looks like standard home improvement work to me. Your neighbor claimed you were demolishing in the middle of the night and that there was an unauthorized construction team working without permits." Tom couldn't help but laugh. "The crew only worked until 5 p.m. yesterday, and they're licensed contractors. I'm sorry you had to come out for this." The younger officer surveyed the demolition. "My parents went through something similar with their pool. turned it into a fire pit area. Looks like you've got a solid plan here. As they walked back to the front yard, Sarah emerged from the house with their two children, Emma and Jake, ages 10 and 8. She looked confused and concerned at the sight of police officers in their yard. "Everything okay?" she asked cautiously, pulling the children closer. "Just a misunderstanding," Tom assured her. Diane stood by the police cruiser, arms crossed and foot tapping impatiently. When she spotted the officers returning without Tom in handcuffs, her expression darkened. "Well," she demanded, "aren't you going to cite him? This is clearly a violation of community standards. I've already drafted a petition that 15 neighbors have signed." Sergeant Wilson's professional demeanor remained intact, but Tom could see a slight tightening around the officer's eyes. "Ms. Keller, is it? There don't appear to be any violations here. The homeowner has the proper permits and is conducting work during appropriate hours. But the noise, the dust, the eyesore," Diane protested, her voice rising an octave. "What about the children, my property values?" The younger officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, removing an unused pool is actually considered a safety improvement, especially in a neighborhood with children." Sarah stepped forward with the folder. "Officer, these are copies of all our permits and approvals. We also have the landscaping plans for after the removal. We're putting in a garden patio and play area that will be much safer than an aging pool." As Diane opened her mouth to object further, Sergeant Wilson raised. Diane Keller's face cycled through several shades of red as Sergeant Wilson's words about false reporting hung in the air. The gathering crowd of neighbors across the street had grown to nearly a dozen people, many still in their Sunday morning robes and slippers, coffees in hand. I was simply trying to protect our community standards," Diane sputtered, her voice carrying across the quiet morning air. "Someone has to take a stand against these haphazard renovations." Tom noticed movement from the house next door to his. Harold Jenkins, the 78-year-old retired judge who had lived in the neighborhood since it was built, was making his way carefully down his front steps with his cane. The appearance of the neighborhood's most respected resident caught everyone's attention. "Excuse me, officers," Harold called, his voice still commanding despite his age. "If I might offer some context here." Sergeant Wilson nodded respectfully. "Of course, sir." Harold made his way to the group, nodding politely to Tom and Sarah before addressing the officers. "I've been watching this situation develop for some time. The Mitchells have been nothing but transparent about their plans. They presented at the HOA meeting, distributed flyers about the construction schedule, and even hosted a neighborhood ice cream social to answer questions." He turned slightly toward Diane. "This is the 4th time in 3 months that Ms. Keller has called authorities on neighbors. Last month, it was the Rodriguez family for their Halloween decorations being too scary. Before that, she reported the Wilsons for their new fence being 2 inches taller than regulations, which it wasn't." Diane's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That's not relevant to today's situation." The younger officer was visibly trying to maintain his professional composure, but a slight smirk betrayed him. "Furthermore," Harold continued, "as the former chair of the architectural committee, I can confirm that pool removal falls under safety improvements, not modifications requiring additional approval. The board president called me yesterday after Ms. Keller contacted him, and I assured him everything was in order." From across the street, Lisa Thompson called out, "Diane reported my son's basketball hoop 3 times, said it was an urban eyesore." More neighbors began chiming in with their own Diane stories, each more ridiculous than the last. The community's long-simmering frustration with their self-appointed regulator was finally boiling over. Sergeant Wilson cleared his throat. "All right, folks, let's maintain some order here." He turned to Diane, his expression serious. "Ms. Keller, we won't be taking any action regarding the pool removal today. However, I strongly advise you to reconsider before making emergency calls for non-emergency situations in the future." The younger officer added, "We have your address flagged in our system now. Any further calls will be thoroughly vetted before dispatch." Diane's eyes widened at this revelation. Her carefully crafted neighborhood authority was crumbling before her eyes. At that moment, a tired-looking man in glasses approached from Diane's house, her husband, Robert. He rarely made appearances at neighborhood events, spending most of his time in his home office. "Diane," he said quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder, "I think we should go home now." For once, Diane seemed at a loss for words. She allowed Robert to guide her away, but not before throwing one last glare at Tom. As the police officers prepared to leave, Sergeant Wilson approached Tom and Sarah. "Sorry about the disturbance. Enjoy your new backyard when it's finished." "We will," Sarah said. "You're welcome to stop by for the barbecue we're planning once the patio is completed." After the police departed, something unexpected happened. Instead of dispersing, the neighbors began drifting toward the Mitchell's yard, offering support and, surprisingly, help. "I've got a truck if you need help hauling anything," offered Frank from 2 doors down. My son's landscaping company could give you a discount on the topsoil, said Margaret from across the street. By afternoon, when it started as a police confrontation, had transformed into an impromptu neighborhood planning session. Lawn chairs appeared, someone brought donuts, and the Mitchell children led tours of the half-demolished pool site like proud museum curators. 3 weeks later, as Tom and Sarah hosted their backyard reveal party on their new patio surrounded by raised garden beds and a child-friendly play area, Harold Jenkins raised a toast. To the Mitchells for bringing our neighborhood together, even if it took a demolished pool and an unwanted police visit to do it. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Even Robert Keller had slipped over, quietly enjoying a burger in the corner. As for Diane, she had suddenly developed a passionate interest in community college courses that, coincidentally, took place during all HOA meetings. And when the Rodriguez family started constructing a garden shed that summer, the neighborhood held its collective breath, but the phone lines to the police department remained blissfully silent. Sometimes the removal of one thing creates space for something better to grow. In Oakwood Estates, it wasn't just a pool that had been removed, but the invisible walls that had kept neighbors from becoming friends. And that was worth far more than any property value. 3 months after the pool incident, as it had come to be known in Oakwood Estates, the neighborhood had undergone a subtle but significant transformation. The Mitchells' new backyard had become something of a community showcase, not because it was the most elaborate or expensive renovation on the block, but because it represented something more meaningful, a victory for reasonable homeownership and neighborly cooperation. On a warm Saturday in July, Tom found himself hosting an impromptu gathering. What had started as a simple request from the Rodriguez family to see how he'd install the irrigation system for his new raised garden beds had evolved into a backyard full of neighbors sharing gardening tips, cold drinks, and conversation. "I never would have tried growing vegetables if I hadn't seen your setup," admitted Frank, the truck-owning neighbor who had helped haul away the last of the pool concrete. "But those tomatoes you gave us last month convinced the wife we should give it a shot." Tom beamed with pride. "The kids are loving it too. Jake's got a science project tracking the growth of different pepper varieties." As if on cue, his son raced across the yard with a digital scale and notebook, serious about his data collection. Several neighbors' children had joined the Mitchell kids in their gardening adventures, forming what Emma had dubbed the Oakwood Sprouts Club, complete with hand-drawn membership cards. Sarah emerged from the house carrying a tray of lemonade. "Anyone heard from the Kellers lately?" she asked, her voice casual but eyes curious. A moment of awkward silence fell over the group before Margaret from across the street cleared her throat. "Robert stopped by our place last weekend to borrow a ladder. Seemed more relaxed than I've seen him in years. Said Diane's been taking some mindfulness classes alongside those community college courses." Lisa Thompson snorted into her drink. "Mindfulness? Diane Keller?" "I know it sounds unlikely," Margaret continued, but Robert mentioned something interesting. Apparently, after the incident, their daughter Jennifer had a serious talk with Diane. Called from Seattle and told her mom she wouldn't bring the grandkids to visit anymore if something didn't change. The group absorbed this revelation with raised eyebrows. Jennifer Keller Williams was a successful attorney who visited only on major holidays, her relationship with her mother notoriously strained. "That would do it," Harold Jenkins commented, settling into the most comfortable chair that Tom always reserved for him. "Nothing motivates change like family." The conversation might have continued in this direction had a delivery truck not pulled up in front of the Kellers' house across the street. The neighbors watched as Robert emerged to sign for a large package. "That's the third delivery this week," observed Lisa. "They're up to something over there." Tom shrugged. "Whatever it is, I hope it makes them happy." As the afternoon progressed, an unexpected visitor appeared at the edge of the yard. Robert Keller stood awkwardly by the garden gate, holding a container of some kind. The conversation died down as Tom approached him. "Hey, Robert, everything okay?" Robert nodded, looking more comfortable in a casual polo shirt than anyone could remember seeing him. "Sorry to interrupt. Diane made her grandmother's rhubarb jam from some plants a colleague gave her. Thought you might like some since you got all these gardens going." The simple gesture left Tom momentarily speechless. "That's really thoughtful. Would you like to join us?" Robert hesitated, glancing back toward his house. Maybe just for a minute. He ended up staying for an hour, quietly participating in conversations about the neighborhood's upcoming fall festival and even offering to help coordinate parking. When he finally made his exit, several neighbors gave him friendly claps on the back. "Did that really just happen?" Sarah whispered to Tom as they watched Robert walk home. "People can surprise you," Tom replied. What surprised the neighborhood even more came the following week, when mailboxes throughout Oakwood Estates received crisp, professionally printed invitations. The Kellers were hosting a backyard transformation reveal of their own. The speculation ran wild. Had they installed a pool, ironically replacing the one the Mitchells had removed? Was it a massive statue of the HOA rulebook? perhaps a shrine to property values. No one could have predicted what they would find when the curious neighbors gathered at the appointed date and time, stepping through the gate into what had previously been Diane Keller's pristine but sterile backyard. The evening of the Kellers' backyard transformation reveal arrived with perfect late summer weather. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk outside the infamous white colonial with green shutters, exchanging curious glances and hushed theories. $5 says it's a meditation garden, whispered Frank to Tom. Margaret mentioned those mindfulness classes. I'm betting on an exact replica of Versailles, countered Lisa Thompson, complete with a hedge maze spelling out Showa rules. Tom just shook his head, genuinely curious about what lay beyond the tall privacy fence. The Keller's backyard had always been hidden behind that barrier, visible only from upstairs windows of adjacent homes. Robert appeared at the front door, looking surprisingly relaxed in khaki shorts and a casual button-down shirt, an outfit that the neighborhood had never seen him wear before. Thanks for coming, everyone, he called, his voice warmer than most had ever heard it. We're ready for you around back. Just follow the path along the side of the house. As the neighbors filed through the gate, they were greeted not by Diane, but by a young woman in her 30s with Diane's distinctive auburn hair, but a much warmer smile. Hi, I'm Jennifer, she said, shaking hands. Mom's just putting the finishing touches on things. She's a bit nervous. Jennifer Keller Williams, the attorney daughter. Many neighbors had heard of her, but few had met her. Beside her stood two children, about 8 and 10, who bore a striking resemblance to their grandmother. The pathway led around a corner, and as each neighbor turned it, there was a collective gasp. Where there had once been a meticulously manicured but sterile landscape of perfect grass and geometric shrubs stood something entirely unexpected. The Keller's backyard had been transformed into a vibrant, whimsical garden space centered around a magnificent treehouse built into the old oak tree. Not a simple children's treehouse, but an elaborate structure with a wraparound porch, rope bridges, and a slide. Beneath it, raised garden beds overflowed with vegetables and flowers in cheerful disarray. A small water feature burbled nearby, surrounded by natural stone. Fairy lights were strung throughout the trees, and comfortable seating areas dotted the landscape. And there, arranging a tray of refreshments on a rustic outdoor table, was Diane Keller. Her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail instead of the severe bun everyone was accustomed to, and she wore jeans, actual jeans, and a comfortable tunic top. When she spotted the crowd, she froze momentarily before taking a visible, deep breath and approaching. Welcome to our new backyard, she said, her voice carrying a hint of the old authoritative tone, but softened with something new, vulnerability. It's quite a change, I know. An awkward silence followed until Harold Jenkins spoke up. It's absolutely charming, Diane. I never knew you had such a creative side. Diane's shoulders relaxed slightly. I didn't either, to be honest. This was all Jennifer's idea. Jennifer stepped forward, placing an arm around her mother's shoulders. Not entirely. When I told Mom we wouldn't visit anymore unless something changed, I didn't expect all this. I may have overreacted, Diane admitted, to audible gasps from several neighbors. But once I started thinking about why I was so resistant to changes in the neighborhood, I realized something. She paused, visibly uncomfortable with the personal revelation. Robert gently prompted, Tell them, Diane. I realized I was afraid, she said finally. Every change felt like something slipping out of control. But when Jennifer threatened to keep the grandkids away, she glanced at the children who were already investigating the treehouse with delight. It made me reevaluate what actually matters. Tom was speechless, but Sarah stepped forward. The treehouse is incredible. Did you build it yourselves? I designed it, Robert said, pride evident in his voice. Those accounting spreadsheets finally gave way to something more creative. We hired the Rodriguez family's construction company to help with the structural elements. Gasps and murmurs spread through the group. The Rodriguez family that Diane had reported multiple times for code violations had built her treehouse. Mr. Rodriguez himself stepped forward with a grin. It was an interesting client meeting, let's say, but we found common ground. As twilight descended, the neighbors relaxed into conversation and exploration. The Keller grandchildren proudly gave tours of the treehouse to other neighborhood kids. Robert explained his rainwater collection system to interested homeowners. And most surprisingly, Diane moved from group to group, not with her clipboard of violations, but with a tray of homemade appetizers and genuine questions about her neighbors' lives. Later, as Tom and Sarah prepared to leave, Diane approached them somewhat hesitantly. I owe you both an apology, she said, the words clearly difficult for her. What I did, calling the police, was ridiculous and petty. Tom nodded, accepting her words. We're just glad to see this new side of you, Diane. It turns out, she said with a small smile, tearing things down sometimes makes room for something better. I believe someone at your backyard party said that. Sarah laughed. I think the whole neighborhood is discovering that. As they walked home under the stars, Tom reflected on the strange journey that had begun with a jackhammer and a pool removal. If someone had told him then that his notorious neighbor would become, if not exactly a friend, at least a civil and occasionally pleasant acquaintance, he would have laughed. The following spring, the Oakwood Estates newsletter featured side-by-side photos: the Mitchells' flourishing garden patio and the Kellers' whimsical treehouse paradise. The headline read, "Transformations, How Two Families Changed More Than Their Backyards." And in a small but significant change, the newsletter's editorial byline read, "Diane Keller, Community Engagement Coordinator, rather than her self-appointed title of Guardian of Oakwood Standards." Sometimes the greatest renovations have nothing to do with property at all.